So I'm glad it's here. So special thanks to the library. Couple of announcements. We have a few events coming up this Sunday at the Bluebird at 6. There is a reading called Three Valley Poets, featuring our own Star Colbrook again, as well as two other local poets, Margaret Pettis and Heidi Blankenship. Again, that's Sunday at 6 at the Bluebird Cafe. Also, the Logan Library is having a Write at the Logan Library conference, a day-long writing conference, coming up on the 27th of this month from 10:15 to 3 p.m. So it's not very long, but I believe it's free because it's here at the library, which is awesome. And that there's 4 presenters coming there, including again our own Star Colbrook, so you get plenty of Star this month. Tonight we have the League of Utah Writers. Our Cache Valley chapter is going to be here reading things that we've done over the past year or so. And then as always, there is open mic for the last half. If you're new here, there's a sign-up sheet in the back, right back there. We can put your name down and we'll give you a shot. And that's pretty much how it goes. So getting started tonight, our first reader will be Amanda Luzzader. Amanda holds the office of the past president for the League of Utah Writers. She is an aspiring novelist and short story writer. In 2016, her short fiction appeared in 3 anthologies: the horror collection It Came from the Great Salt Lake, the Helicon West anthology, and the League of Utah Writers anthology. Among Amanda's other publications are several short stories published by Simon & Schuster for Chicken Soup for the Soul, and the anthologies Between Places, titled after a piece she wrote, Old Scratch and Hoot Owls, and In the Shimmering. She is employed as a technical and grant writer for a nonprofit organization. She has won 19 awards in the League of Utah Writers annual contest, including Best in Show for poetry, and first place for adult manuscript, encore poetry, literary fiction, and flash fiction. She is currently working on a novel, and Amanda enjoys spending time with her children, reading, photography, and watching Downton Abbey. Amanda.
Thank you. Is this on?
I'm not sure it is.
It doesn't seem to be. There you go.
That's all right.
Okay.
So the piece I brought to read today is called Daphne the Girl in the Armor. And unfortunately, it was too long for me to read the whole thing, so I'm just going to be reading the second half. But this piece has been published twice. It's in the anthology Chasing Magic and also the anthology Intersections. And both of those are available for purchase on Amazon. So if you do want to read the whole story, you can find them there. But here goes. I guess I should tell you what happened in the first half of the story. So this is a kind of fairy tale of sorts. And it's about a man named Alessandro, and he lives in this tiny village called Tazza. And when Alessandro becomes an adult, he has this feeling that the love of his life is somewhere out there in the world, and he has to go and find her. And so he leaves this small village that he's very happy in and that he's never left, and he takes his best friend, who is his donkey, Macame, and they set out to travel the world looking for Alessandro's soulmate. So that's what you've missed. For 5 years, 3 months, and 24 days, they traveled the world, eating and drinking and trading stories with new friends. But Macame was ready to go home. He had seen the sun rise and set in all corners of the world. He'd stood atop a mountain so high he saw the curve of the earth. But he missed his friends in Tazza, the duck and pig, and even the horses. He walked a little slower, and his ears didn't perk up anymore at the scent of food. Alessandro took little notice because he was walking slower too. And sometimes when they came to a new village, he'd only sigh and walk on by. Macame, he said, what if there's no one for me? Or what if after all this searching, I've missed her? Macame rolled his eyes. Alessandro felt an ache in the pit of his stomach and thought about home. He missed his friends too, and his mama. He missed the smell of the hay in the fields after the rain, but mostly he was afraid that he was wasting his life chasing something that didn't exist. That night it rained, and Alessandro was thankful because the raindrops concealed his tears from Macame, and the last thing he would want would be for that jackass to see him cry. In the morning, Alessandro rose and smiled and breathed deeply. He decided it was good he hadn't found her, because things easily obtained are taken for granted. Alessandro believed in love, from the tips of his toes and all through his body. It wouldn't matter if she were 100 years old when he found her, or if she were lazy or whatever. The heart would know what it wanted, and his heart would tell him when he found her. And if he never found her, that was all right too, because it was noble to spend one's life pursuing true love. They traveled another 2 years and 43 more days, and by then they had become the best of friends. They'd sleep in haylofts, passing gas and telling jokes. Macame would never admit it, but he wanted to find Alessandro's soulmate too. Alessandro was his best friend, and he wanted him to be happy. One morning, they wandered into a grove of aspen trees, where birds sang and low shrubs of holly spread over the ground. And there in the open meadow, they spied a warrior, clad in full armor, engaged in furious single combat. "My God, what a woman!" Alessandro cried. Macame brayed. How could his friend know this was a woman? "Of course it's a woman," said Alessandro. "See the elegance of her movements?" Macame brayed again. The fighter was indeed skilled, but she had no opponent. "I'm not sure why that is," conceded Alessandro. The lady warrior brought up her shield to turn back a mighty blow, but still there was no one else to be seen in the meadow. "Her enemy must be invisible," Alessandro observed. In all their travels, they'd never seen such a person. She was astounding, maybe a little crazy, but unlike any other woman they'd ever seen. They'd finally found her. "Well, wait," Alessandro said, without looking away, "and when she's victorious, we'll introduce ourselves." But the strange battle continued all morning. She swung, drew back, and parried unseen strikes. The sun moved across the meadow, and she fought on. She labored for so long that Alessandro and Macame grew tired and lay down in the grass to watch. When noon came, they ate their cheese and bread. Alessandro wished to share it with the girl, but she fought so intensely he did not want to distract her. Finally, Alessandro stood. "We can't let her fight alone," he said. He found a sturdy length of tree branch and rushed into the meadow. The girl had fallen onto the ground and was holding her shield up. Alessandro swung his club wildly, hoping to connect with whatever the girl was fighting. It only swished through the air. The girl sat up and lifted her visor. Her dark hair was sweat-soaked and clung to her skin. Alessandro couldn't say what color her eyes were, but he was certain they were the most beautiful eyes he had ever seen. "I'm Alessandro," he said. "I'm Daphne," she replied, and then she clapped the visor shut and resumed her combat. All day she fought. Sometimes she made great strides across the meadow as her sword slashed the air, and Alessandro and Macame would run behind her, cheering. Other times she was forced back, and Alessandro would stand in front of her, hoping to protect her. But this enemy was apparently personal to Daphne, because she alone could fight it. Daphne never stopped fighting. Alessandro and Macame had to stop for food and sleep, but Daphne never did. And this made Alessandro love her even more. One day, Alessandro drew close to Daphne as they fought. "Daphne," he shouted, "I love you." For a moment, she paused and lifted her visor. "I love you too." Alessandro felt he might float away with joy. After one entire year, on a day when Daphne had fought nearly to her breaking point, she stopped abruptly. Her sword dropped from her gauntlet-clad hand. "I'm done," she said. "I don't want to fight anymore." "Come home with me, Daphne," said Alessandro. "Let me take care of you." Daphne lifted her visor and looked at Alessandro. Her eyes were brown. Alessandro was certain her silence would cause him to burst. "I think," she said after a few moments, "that I would like that." And so they began the long journey back to Tazah. The trip would take them half a year, and they talked almost the entire time. Alessandro told Daphne about what a jackass Macame was, and Macame said the same of Alessandro. Daphne told them about her childhood and home and family, but she never spoke about her battle, nor who or what it was she'd been fighting. and she would never remove her armor. When they finally reached Tazah, Alessandra was eager to introduce Daphne to everyone. It would be the beginning of their perfect life. They would marry and have babies and raise pigs, and Alessandro would have everything he ever wanted. We're here, Alessandro shouted as they entered the village. He pulled Daphne behind him, but she could not move very quickly in her armor. Soon the villagers gathered to see. It's Alessandro, they cried. He's come home. But when they saw Daphne in her coat of armor, they scratched their heads. He turned down our daughter for this, a mother whispered to her husband. Instead of exclamations of joy, as Alessandro had expected, the villagers seemed perplexed. They stared quietly. Daphne shrank inside her armor and stood very close to Alessandro. At last they came to Alessandro's hut, and there was his mama, as portly as ever. Alessandro dropped Daphne's hand to sweep his mother up into a big hug. I found her, he declared, and you will love her. You're all going to love her. She's perfect. Alessandro's mom blinked at the perfect girl, who stood alone now, looking very afraid and small beneath her greaves and plate of steel. This is who you found, his mama scowled. I can't even see her. Why is she hiding behind all that armor? Alessandro gently led Daphne inside, closing the door and shutters against the stares of the neighbors. Even when several weeks had passed, no one other than Macame could understand why Alessandro was so interested in Daphne. What's with the armor, they'd asked. What is she frightened of? She will take it off when she is ready, he answered, but then he wondered if she ever would. He longed to be close to her, to feel her in his arms. After a few more weeks, he told her, you don't need the armor anymore. You're safe here. I'll protect you. Daphne shook her head. I can't take it off. Alessandro's mama took him aside and said, don't you see, she's playing you for a fool, sleeping in your house, eating your food, but never taking off the armor? That's not love. She just needs time, mama, said Alessandro. Yes, a few weeks maybe, but she's been here 6 months now. Alessandro grew angry. This is between us, he shouted. Still, Alessandro went to the dressmaker and he bought the most exquisite dress. He laid it on the bed. It's beautiful, said Daphne. Put it on, he said. I can't, she told him. Alessandro knew what the people of the village whispered, and he wondered too. Why wouldn't she take off the armor? Hadn't he proven his love and devotion? He'd given her his heart, so why? Surely if she loved him the way he loved her, she would want to hold him as he wanted to hold her. And he slowly turned angry, resentful. He sulked. One afternoon, he pushed Daphne's hand away when she touched him. What's wrong? Asked Daphne. I don't want to be touched by your armor, he spat. I want you. He went drinking with Macame and didn't come home for days. Daphne cried behind her faceplate, but still she would not take off her armor. Finally, Alessandro said he'd had enough, and so he told her, either you take off the armor or you get out. It wasn't that Alessandro didn't love her. He did. With all his heart, he loved her, but he couldn't understand why she was so guarded, even with him. He felt he couldn't go another day without holding her, touching her. I thought you loved me, Daphne replied. I do, said Alessandro. Then don't do this, she pleaded. If you really love me, you will do this for me. It will kill me, Daphne said. No, don't you see? You don't need the armor now. Is this the only way? Daphne asked, crying. Alessandro paused for a moment. He loved her. He knew things would be better without the armor. Yes, he said finally, it's the only way. Then take it off of me, she said. She lay down on the bed, and Alessandro removed her helmet and visor, then the pauldrons and gauntlets, and finally the breastplate and tasset and greaves. And for the first time ever, he saw her, all of her. She was beautiful, and she was broken. Fine cracks crossed her skin. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been shattered and then pieced back together with glue. Daphne sat up and she smiled nervously. What is this? Said Alessandro. These marks, what are they? Alessandro, I tried to tell you. Just then, a piece of her cheek fell off, like a shard of eggshell. It came away from her face and fell to the floor, leaving a black space. As though by instinct, she covered the void with her hand, but the sudden movement started a chain reaction. Her fingers broke like icicles and fell to pieces with the tinkling of broken glass. Then her arm fell to pieces. Before Alessandro's eyes, the love of his life crumbled. He tried to hold her together, but he could not, and she fell apart and splintered into dust. Only then Alessandro realized that the armor had held Daphne together. He understood then that it was not his place to remove her armor before she had healed. And then he felt a great crack forming in his heart. He looked at Daphne's armor and he felt the fractures spread within him. Once again, he packed up his donkey Macame for a long journey, but first he visited the village blacksmith, who fitted Alessandro himself with a suit of armor. And then Alessandro left to fight a battle with a foe nobody else could see. It's now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Jeremy Goheir. Jeremy is this very dapper-looking gentleman on the front row. And Jeremy has a degree in film and media arts and has been involved in independent films as well as productions for MTV, Discovery Channel, and Disney. He has since switched his efforts to writing after getting over the crazy notion that writing is only for people who know how to write. His writing has received awards in categories including poetry, short fiction, novel chapters, and children's books. His poem, All Twisted Up, was named Best in Show for the 2015 League of Utah Writers Contest. His short story, Hydrogeist, is published in the Utah Horror Writers Anthology. It came from the Great Salt Lake. His short story, D.A. at Makane, as well as his poem, All Twisted Up, are included in the anthology Mirrored Realities. And his short story, Piper, is published in the anthology Volatile When Mixed, as well as the anthology Chasing Magic, which was released in June 2017. And finally, his short story, Urban Lights, was published in the 13th issue of Non-Binary Review. Here's Jeremy.
Thank you. One of the great things about the League of Utah Writers is that you have plenty of people around that like to tell you when you succeed at what you're trying to do, and also when you don't. The poem I'm going to read tonight, I wrote about 6 months ago. I had in my head that I was going to set out and do something I'd never done before. I was going to write a prose poem. I was very quickly pointed out to me that I was not actually writing prose poetry, but was in fact writing free verse. So maybe one day I'll write a prose poem. But in the meantime, this is Rain Check. It's not that I don't want to see you. I pine for late night walks through fields of fireflies and rooftop views from island hostels I probably couldn't find again if I tried. For the dancing in the rain until the thunder chased us inside, and the tears spilled over thoughtless words, spat between too many hours in the back seat of the same bus, and for the day after apologies. But every time I turn to Facebook, hoping for a new adventure, I find the pictures of me asleep in the back seat of your car have long since been replaced by bridal veils wafting in soft breezes over salt flats, and grayscale newborns snuggled in baby fat. The midnight skinny dipping in flooded rivers has been covered in the fresh paint of picket fences, and the pictures of first birthday cakes, pictures I'm still surprised not to see myself in. Counting the days that have slipped away since the last time we sat on the roof outside your window, envisioning all of the things we'd be and do and have when we finally grew up. Realization congeals to acceptance. My everyday has become your remember when. I know we said we'd never drift apart, but you feel a little further every time I pick up the phone, and you ask me what's new, and I can't think of anything to say. Thank you. All right, our next reader apparently needs no introduction because he's never bothered to give us a biography. So, here are some things about Tim Tarbet. He's an RM, a graduate of Utah State University, and a scientist. He also holds a black belt in karate. We assume he enjoys outdoorsy stuff. He's quite good with horror and sci-fi, and with the same passion he loathes the not so good stuff. A passion only we have seen and come to admire. Tim is kind of our resident expert in the Cache Valley chapter on just about everything. So much so that he moved to American Fork to become the president of that chapter, and he's still the Cache Valley resident expert on just about everything. His work has appeared recently in the anthology Volatile and Mixed, in which his is the title piece. His short stories and essays can also be found in the anthologies Between Places and Mirrored Realities. Tim.
In my defense, this is the first I've heard of this. I didn't know I was supposed to give a list of my accomplishments beforehand. So this is a piece about sins as a missionary. It's titled Silence of the Lambs. The first time I saw Silence of the Lambs was on my mission. Now, before you go making any wild assumptions, I would like to put forth a little context. First, I was a stickler for rules. I was the kind of missionary who, if forced to choose between the faster route and the route that wouldn't take us out of our area, I would choose the latter, much to the frustration of my companions. I was the kind of missionary who had to be forced to celebrate his birthday because it took time away from the work. In fact, I was such a stickler for rules that I refused to watch The Dark Knight Rises when it was playing on the bus on the way home from a mission conference. Yeah, I was that guy. Now, my companion of the time, Elder Hernandez, was very much on the opposite side of the spectrum regarding the rules and the following thereof. To illustrate my point, he is the only missionary I know who got a mohawk. It was a weekday afternoon, and really the only reason we were taking the time to get our haircut was because one of our appointments had fallen through. We both needed one, badly, but it always felt like such a waste of time. Still, it was better than the alternatives. Both of us hated tocando puertas, though each of us for different reasons. I hated the futility of the exercise, and Hernandez hated the work it involved. So it seemed like a prime opportunity to get the deed over with. It was a beautiful afternoon, as beautiful as one can get in the noisy, stinking confines of El Estado de Mexico. The hairdresser, like the majority of shops in El Estado, was run out of the front of someone's home. I had gone first, gotten my customary almost too short cut, and was sitting in one of the spare chairs indulging in one of the hairdresser's many magazines. Reading was a temptation that I just never could resist, regardless of material. Hernandez had just sat down, and the woman had just wrapped the haircutting bib around his throat. ¿Qué te doy? As I recall, he seemed to think for a moment, examining himself in the mirror. I was as engrossed as a prudish heterosexual male can possibly be in a Mexican glamour magazine when I heard, Deme un moicano. Give me a mohawk. I nearly choked. What? Uno chiquito. Está bien. It's not fine. It's against the rules. You can't have one, I said as I put the magazine aside. Uno chiquito. Que ni se ve. I don't care if you can't see it. It's still against the rules. He turned to the hairdresser, who was, by this point, quite bewildered. Démelo. Don't do it. Uno chiquito, de un centímetro, nada más. He mimed the size with his fingers. No, it doesn't matter. It's against the rules. When we left the hairdresser's, Elder Hernandez was strutting like a peacock. Never mind, the mohawk was only apparent if you knew what to look for, and even then only barely. He even had an interview with the mission president with it still intact. If the mission president noticed, he never mentioned it, nor did I. May have been a stickler for rules, but I wasn't a tattler. Not long after, Mexico was hit by the swine flu. If the timing was divine or not, I'm not entirely sure. I'd like to think that God has better things to do with his time than smite entire nations for the rebellious transgressions of a single missionary. But then again, he might not. Now, I don't know what happened in the United States, but the swine flu shut Mexico down completely. Nobody left their houses. The streets were utterly deserted. Medical masks were sold out, and all but the largest stores were closed. Worse, we got a visit from our district leaders. For those who haven't been on a mission, visits from the district leaders are always a bad thing, and this was no exception. They told us that, on account of the epidemic, the mission president had given out a number of emergency instructions. For the duration of the epidemic, nobody was to do any traditional contacting. This included both street contacting and knocking on doors. We were not to accept any new investigators. We were not allowed to schedule any more appointments with existing investigators. When we were teaching, we were to remain in our apartments. And finally, we weren't allowed to wear ties for the duration of the epidemic. Now, just to be clear, I wasn't particularly torn up about not wearing a tie. While every missionary tends to sport a rather impressive collection of ties, as far as I was concerned, ties are the veritable spawn of Satan himself. I was looking forward to some tracheal freedom for the foreseeable future. Now, I was worried about what we were going to do once we ran out of lessons. The next few days went slower and slower as we were left with more and more time on our hands. Before long, we were taking refuge in investigators and occasionally members' houses. I felt a little bad about this, but we did have appointments with them, so it wasn't technically breaking the rules if we chilled at their houses for a little while after our lessons. I mean, it's not like we had anything better to do. I'd pretty much memorized Preach My Gospel by this point, read the Book of Mormon multiple times, and even finished the Bible in its entirety. And it's not like we had anything else to read. Our final appointment fell on that Saturday. We were teaching a middle-aged woman in her apartment and had just concluded the second lesson when she offered to put on a movie for us. I smiled. This wasn't completely out of the ordinary, and she didn't know any better. All I'd have to do was gently explain that to better show God how much we loved him, we abstained from participating in certain activities while we were on our seat, Elder Hernandez explained. I glanced over to my companion and then to our investigator. Actually, we can't. You see, no manchas, Elder. Está bien. No, it wouldn't be fine. We were missionaries. There were rules. I think you can see where this is going. They teamed up on me, and before long, I gave in. Honestly, I didn't put up much of a fight. Not only did we literally not have anything else to do that day, but I knew there was very little I could do at this point. Elder Hernandez held all the cards, and he knew it. I couldn't leave without him. If I did, I'd still be in the wrong. And tattling on him to his own leader or to the president would only destroy an already bumpy relationship. So we settled down to pick a movie. Even before my mission, I wasn't much of a moviegoer, and I didn't recognize most of the bootleg DVDs that she had. So I offered no opinion on what we should watch. Eventually, my companion selected Silence of the Lambs, which I hadn't even heard of. I glanced on the back, which was barely legible due to the low-quality scan. I couldn't read much, but I did notice something very important. It was rated R. I pointed this out without any real hope it would change their minds. No te preocupes, Elder. Está bien. No está tan malo. Despite my companion's reassurances, I did worry. Like a good little Mormon boy, I had never actually seen an R-rated film, and here I was, on my mission, about to watch my first. It would not be an exaggeration to say that I feared for my immortal soul. Throughout the movie, there was always a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. You're a missionary. You shouldn't be here. You should be setting an example for the investigator and for your companion. You're failing. Not only that, but the film wasn't nearly as innocent as my companion had led me to believe. I didn't understand what multiple Megs meant when he said he could smell Agent Starling's cunt, as it was a word I'd never heard before. But I was uncomfortable with Lecter's references to tedious, sticky fumblings in the back seats of cars, unsettled when Miggs flung his personal discharge into Starling's face, and positively mortified when Buffalo Bill stuffed his penis between his legs and made that clumsy attempt to belly dance. Of course, the things that didn't unsettle me are perhaps just as telling. The mystery and the violence both enthralled me, even if I was too distracted by my conscience to fully appreciate all of the subtle nuances of the plot. It puts the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again, remains one of my favorite lines. When the film finally ended, I was dancing on pins and needles, as eager to flee the scene as any criminal, when our investigator pulled out the sequel. I mean, it's not like we had anything else to do.
Thank you, Tim. I've been asked to read one more poem, and the one I've chosen I like partly because I wrote about half of it while I was sitting right there listening to Poetry 3 here at Helicon West. So keep coming to Helicon West, it's awesome. This is All Twisted Up. It seemed he tied her tongue in knots while giving her a smile, and she pickled Peter's peppers like it was going out of style. But sweetly whispered nothings offered very little clue of the Tweedle-Beetle Puddle-Paddle battle to ensue. How did that little busy bee improve his golden days while wrapping evening memories in murky twilight haze? The fault was not completely hers, I'll never say it was, despite the way she drew him in with gently smiling jaws. There had been times he asked, as their toy boat set out to space, if that peck of pickled peppers may have somehow been misplaced. Yet still the ragged rascal ran around those rugged rocks, and all the pretty ponies kept their secrets like Fort Knox. It ended with a simple thing he barely thought would matter, but that bit of bitter butter really bittered Betty's batter. Her burning ears were hanging low, the diamond ring turned brass. The cat's back in the cradle in the house now made of glass. The lion to his unicorn, she stopped him where he stood, and let's just say that woodchuck had chucked all the wood he could. At last the toes of Moses turned out not to smell like roses, regardless of whatever either party still supposes. Now he's off to unique New York to be a man of means, and she's still selling seashells by the seashores of her dreams. Their rhyming game was at an end, a blink, and both had missed it. How a thing that seemed so simple could have ended up so twisted. Thank you. Our final featured reader for this evening will be Emily Wheeler. Emily works as a historian, writing, teaching, and consulting about history and historic preservation. She has graduate degrees in history and landscape architecture and currently teaches history at Utah State University. Emily has articles in Pioneer Magazine and Utah Historical Quarterly, and her essay Imperfect Instruments won the 2015 Prose Award from Sigilla Magazine. Her short stories and essays can also be found in the anthologies Intersections, Volatile and Mixed, and Mirrored Realities. Her first novel, The Haunting of Spring at Hall, won the Gold Quill Award for Best YA Novel from the League of Utah Writers. She published 2 adult novels in 2016, Born to Treason, a Whitney Finalist Award, and No Peace with the Dawn, which she co-wrote with Jeffrey Baton. And that also won the Gold Quill Award. She was also named the League of Utah Writers Writer of the Year for 2016. Emily.
Shouldn't have sat in the back, that's a long walk. This piece is called Counting Magpies. I hate missing persons cases. Granted, I don't enjoy busting meth labs or breaking up domestic disputes, but at least there's closure, a sense that the world is a little safer now. But missing persons cases hang there, files never closed, defying neatness and order, haunting me. Take the one on my desk right now. Dr. Jenny Blake, African-American, medium dark skin, long braids, age 34. Just stopping over on her way back from a pediatrician's conference in LA. She checked into the hotel at 6 and walked to the neighboring Denny's for dinner. Nothing odd about her behavior there. I've already interviewed the hostess and waitress. Then she walked back to the hotel. That's where things get weird. I've got the footage from the security cameras. Her pace is casual as she approaches the lobby door, and she slows to dig in her purse. For gum, her room key. She stops, looks out over the desert. The sunset highlights dark street lamps and the birds resting on the power lines. There's not much to see out there, just sagebrush, the outline of worn black rocks from long extinct volcanoes, maybe a jackrabbit. Jenny sort of nods like she's listening to something. I've checked all the angles, including the stores across the street. She was alone. No one out there in the dusk. She glances up and makes eye contact with the security camera. Her eyes meet mine for a moment, like she's making a decision or saying goodbye. Then she walks off into the desert, just like that. The cameras from the back of the hotel catch one last glimpse of her wandering off into the darkness, a blur in the night, vanishing. We pinged her cell phone, hoping to narrow down her location. Searchers found her purse not far from the hotel, sitting on the twisted trunk of a dead Joshua tree. Just sat there like she meant to come back for it. No sign of a struggle. The phone still had a charge, but there was no other trace of Jenny Blake. We're still combing the desert, but it's vast and unforgiving, and it's been a week. It's not illegal to walk away from your life. Jenny, or any of the rest of us, has the right to drop our briefcases or purses and just go. But she left behind a husband and 2 kids. Her practice was thriving, and everything indicates she loved her work. She wasn't on any medications, had no history of mental illness, no known enemies or financial problems. We still have to assume she's in danger, if not from herself or someone else, at least from the desert. And now I have to meet with the family again. Her husband has gone back to his hotel with the kids for the night, but her mother and sister have come back to the station hoping for an update. Hi, John. Officer Hernandez smiles at me from her desk, a sympathetic smile. The only bright spot in this day. I wrap it up to mull over later. I'm going to need it. I step into the little waiting room with a couple of old brown couches and a coffee machine. Two women glance up, fear and desperate hope lining their faces. Have you found anything? Jenny's mother asks quietly. I sit across from them. I'm sorry, but there's nothing new. Jenny's sister breaks, curls up in her seat with sobs shaking her body. Her mother lowers her head, defeated. We'll keep searching. My words sound empty even to me. Jenny's mom meets my eyes. Why? Why would she leave? I shake my head. This is the worst part of missing person cases. The unanswered questions. The realization that underneath the facade of daily activities, of text messages and Facebook posts and family dinners, maybe we don't really know anybody. Secrets hide behind every face, buried so deep some of us might not know our own darkest corners except in fragments of strange dreams. Sometimes it's other people's secrets that hurt us, but usually it's our own. It's dark by the time I leave the station. A bird croaks and I jump. A magpie perches in the tree outside the station, watching over the parking lot, probably drawn by the floodlights. The white of its wings stand out in the shadows, but the night swallows the bird's black body. What is that saying about magpies? One for sorrow, two for joy? We've had enough sorrow. Beat it, I call, and the bird flies off, its wings a bright flash in the darkness. The magpie is waiting when I show up in the morning. He's not alone this time. 3 of the damn things sit in their tree watching me. I try to wave them away with my Starbucks cup, but they're not intimidated. Three magpies. 1 is for sorrow, 2 is for joy. There's more to the nursery rhyme than that, but I can't remember it. It nags me all morning as I go over reports. No news on Jenny Drake. I have to set her file aside. 1 for sorrow. There are fresh problems pushing their way in. The morning news is starting to move on too. They give a brief blip on Jenny and then go on to the latest political scandal and a local kid killed in a car accident. Hit and run. Some guy blasted through a stop sign in a white car, maybe a Toyota, hit the family on the way back from a soccer game and sped off again, nowhere to be found. No witnesses. Like the guy materialized long enough to smash into the car and vanished again. So random, pointless. Hernandez walks past me, bringing the scent of coffee and cinnamon. She pauses next to my desk to watch the news and shakes her head. I hate it when it's kids. Her voice is so quiet I'm not sure if she's talking to me or herself. I nod, 1 for sorrow. She touches my computer monitor, almost like she's catching her balance. Her fingernails are short, carefully filed, but the usually perfect red paint is chipped. There's a special place in hell for bastards like that driver. This time she meets my eyes. Her pupils are dilated into vulnerable pools of black. Yeah, though I can't decide if I believe in hell. I wish, she squeezes her eyes shut, takes an uneven breath. I wish there was more we could do, but no matter how hard I work, it never ends. I stand. I want to hold her, but we're in the middle of the station. I have to do something, so I take a chance I haven't before. Do you need a break? We could grab some lunch, together. She smiles sadly. I don't have much of an appetite today. Another time, though, really. The vague promise rescues my plummeting hopes and my ego. And John, thanks. She touches my arm and moves on, but the scent of cinnamon lingers. 2 for joy. Alone on my lunch break, I Googled the nursery rhyme. There it is. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy, 5 for silver, 6 for gold, 7 for a secret never to be told. Meaningless. I'd like to hope the 3 birds mean we're going to find Jenny, but her time is up. I have to file her case with my other frustrations and focus on those I can actually help. There are a whole flock of magpies outside when I leave, 6 of them. 6 for gold. I shake my head and drive away. A week later, the official search for Jenny is called off. Some of her family lingers like the ghosts of the case, working with a few stalwart community volunteers who want to help them find closure. Closure. They may find some remains if they're lucky, but they're never going to find answers. Hernandez is on leave, personal reasons. She needed the break, but the station feels louder and emptier at the same time. I pull up Jenny's Facebook page again on my break and scroll past pictures of her kids and meals at nice restaurants, an occasional political post, What was she hiding? What was bubbling beneath the smooth surface? And there it is, buried between a picture of pad thai and a gif of a cat falling into a laundry basket in an endless cycle. One of those days at work, it never ends. Someone please get me a drink and a tropical beach. A few hearts and sad face emojis from friends follow it up. But then there's the cat in the laundry basket with 40 thumbs and laughing yellow faces, and we all move on. Except Jenny didn't. The cat falls, reappears on the counter, falls again, and Jenny has another day at work, and another, and another. It never ends, until it does. I click on the sad face response, then I share the cat and its laundry basket, a last tribute before I get back to work. The magpies have taken a liking to our parking lot. I ignore them. When I show up the next morning, the chief calls us into the meeting room. He looks bad. I know that look. He's been up all night worried about something. His own Jenny Blake is haunting him, making him live on coffee and energy drinks because he can't afford to sleep. I have some news about Officer Hernandez, he says. The room goes still. I saw Hernandez 2 days ago. She was healthy, whole, beautiful. There were no officer-related shootings overnight, no fatal car accidents. Some of you may have heard rumors, but I want you to get the story from me. He takes a long breath. The whole world waits on that breath. Officer Hernandez died last night, opioid overdose. And the world collapses, brittle pieces falling around me, blinding me. It's not possible. We see what drugs do to people every day. How could she have? Hot flares of disbelief, anger, helplessness, fear. It started with a legal prescription. She just let it get out of hand. How did she let it get out of hand? Where was that one moment where she could have turned it around? Did she know it when she popped that pill in her mouth, that it was the moment she was letting go? How did it feel? How did we miss the signs? Depression, dilated pupils, shakiness, restlessness. How did I miss the signs? The chief rambles on about funeral services and grief counselors. It buzzes around me, something from another world, another lifetime, a reality that ended when he said that Hernandez was gone. I swear I can still smell cinnamon. I make it through the day, but leave a few minutes early. 3 magpies sit on the roof of my car. I shoo them away, but they won't leave. They tilt their heads, fix me with black eyes. I swat at them, but they flap and land a little out of reach. I half climb onto my car, trying to get rid of them. One bird hops closer and croaks, "John." I jump back, hand on my gun, but it must have been my imagination. I know crows can imitate human sounds. Maybe magpies can too, but what are the chances of them knowing how to imitate my name? I climb into the car and slam the door. The damn birds can sit there for the whole drive home for all I care. Of course, when I do arrive home, they're gone. No way birds can cling to a car. John, John, John. 3 magpies sitting in the tree in my yard. I fumble for my keys. It takes 2 tries to get the key into the lock. Then hurry inside, close the door on the birds, and deadbolt it. I laugh at myself. A deadbolt for birds? They're not coming inside. Besides, magpies are everywhere, and they're flocking birds, aren't they? I hate myself for it, but I Google magpies again. Intelligent, they recognize themselves in the mirror and are expert thieves. They're members of the crow family, and like crows, flocks can be called a murder, a charm, or a tiding. But they tend to live in pairs, not large groups. There are more references to the nursery rhyme, too. Another, older version, its roots obscured by time. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy. 3 for a funeral, 4 for a birth. 5 for heaven, 6 for hell. 7 for the devil, his own self. 3 for a funeral. I shut the browser, turn off the computer. The curtains are closed, but I peek outside. The 3 birds are still sitting there. Even through the glass, I can hear them. John, John, John. I turn up the TV loud and fall asleep in front of it. I'm behind on my paperwork, and I can't focus on the latest burglary. I still smell cinnamon, see Hernandez out of the corner of my eye. The chief calls me into his office to talk. There's nothing you could have done about Hernandez, he says. Do you need some time off? I take a deep breath. No, I need to keep working. I have to get myself back under control, back to normal. But the magpies won't leave me alone. There's 7 of them now. 7 magpies everywhere I go. They call John, John, John. No one else hears it. It's like they're trying to tell me something. Messengers. Crows and ravens were believed to be messengers from the dead. I can't get Hernandez out of my mind, or Jenny Blake. I dream about them, Hernandez and Blake, staring at me with hollow black eyes like they're waiting for something. It never ends, Jenny Blake tells me, though her mouth is stitched shut. It's stupid, I'm being paranoid, but I look again at the security footage of Jenny Drake, zoom in on the power line. 7 birds with white wings watch as she turns her back on the world. The chief gently requires me to take some time off. I have plenty of paid time I can use, but what am I supposed to do with it? I search the desert, looking for any trace of Jenny Blake. There's nothing. It's so empty. I can look it up on Google Maps, and we have aerial photos of every mile of it. But we don't really know it, the desert. It surrounds us, and we think we've conquered it, but it keeps its secrets. I end up in my backyard, staring off across that unknowable horizon. John, the familiar croak, sounds from behind me. I don't have to look to know how many there are, but I turn anyway. 7 magpies. 7 for a secret never to be told. Or 7 for the devil. Which is it? Is there a difference? John, a magpie, calls again. The first one, sorrow. John, squawks the second, and I smell cinnamon, Hernandez. John, ringing deep like a funeral bell. John. This one is smaller, its voice shrill. John, the soothing tones of a preacher beckoning me back. John, a low croak that pierces my soul. Misery, love, death, life, heaven, hell, all things that touch me, but I can't touch them back. I can't do anything about them. It never ends. John, the last magpie speaks, a rasping graveyard voice, Jenny Blake. I glance across the desert. The answers are out there somewhere with Blake, Hernandez, and all the others. What do they know that I don't? I can find out. John, a ghostly whisper on the hot desert wind. It's time to give in, to admit I'm not in control of any of it, to let the facade crumble. I take off my hat and sunglasses. The desert sun curls around me. Dry heat fills my lungs, burning away the tightness in my chest. Peace. How long has it been since I felt peace? Somewhere in the distance, my cell phone rings, calling me back into the world of questions and uncertainties, but the desert stretches away in front of me, and its secrets beckon.
Thank you, Emily. A couple of things before we move into the open mic portion of tonight's event. First off, Helicon has been around for a long time, as I said, over 10 years, and there is an anthology that's collected tributes to 10 years of featured readers that have been here at Helicon West. These are available either online on Amazon, or you can talk to Star if you'd like, and they're amazing. I have one on my shelf. Also, for featured readers, you may notice there's a video going on here. If for any reason you prefer not to be videoed, feel free to let myself or our videographer know, and we can make that happen. There is also plenty of room if anyone is on the fence about whether or not you want to read. Okay, I'm putting Chad down here. If I don't know your name.
Rex.
Rex, all right. I was going to say, you can also come up and talk to me here if you want, either way.
And put Ron Jensen down.
And Ron, of course, Ron. All right. So with that, our first featured readers, or our first open mic readers tonight will be Rachael Christensen, Millie Tullis, and Andrew Romriell. Say that right? All right, Rachel.
Hello. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. This is my first time reading, and it's been a really long time since I've written poetry, so I'm sorry if it sucks. Anyway, this is called New Year's Goals, or alternatively, my state of mind entering 2018. Work hard, meditate daily, finally see a doctor, get help. Enjoy the spare time, focus on health, physical and mental. Meet new people, keep a journal, don't stare too far into the void. Draw every day, develop more skill, write poems sometimes. Stay motivated, express self constructively, stop staring into the void. Think more positively, outrun the crippling fear of failure, focus on breathing, and when the hollow grasping emptiness gains on you, bare all of your teeth and fight back. Thank you. Actually forgot that I was coming up after that. So this poem is from the perspective of the wolf in Little Red Riding Hood's mother. So it's called Wolf's Mother. You should have seen the way she draped herself in all that red, like it was just another skin. You know why they wear all that red and pink flesh tones, why they trot in shades meant to tempt, the fruit of their loins pressing up against you, those apple mounds producing their dark liquor. Thank you.
Hi there. My name's Andrew Romriell. This will actually be my last time reading because I'm moving after this. So, yeah. So I'm reading. It's actually flash nonfiction. It's based on the same topics as the first poem I read for Helicon West. So I figured it was a good one to read. It's called Casting Virginity. You could say that I lost my virginity in a park, in a public park, a place where he took me on my first ever date with a man. We walked across grass, watching sprinklers spray the manicured lawns, little ponds, streams, and bridges laced through the area. It was pristine, protected by tender human hands. Then he pressed himself against me, pushed me into the watered grass. I pushed against him, but he forced his way in. After, I looked up what it meant to be a non-virgin. I found there was no word in English to define it. So many synonyms for virgin. Unspoiled, stainless, pure. Clicking through online questions, I tried to find a word to define the person I'd become. The only answers came in changing the word itself, non-virgin, ex-virgin, turning the word into an anti-definition. The antonyms of the synonyms would become something else too, spoiled, stained, impure. That is what I became. That is what he made me. He cast dirt and grime and grass stains onto a canvas I'd worked so hard to leave white. So that could be how I lost my virginity, how I became a non-virgin, but some say rape doesn't count against morality like that. You could say I lost my virginity 3 months later, on a twin-sized bed with red sheets and a black blanket, when my parents left and my boyfriend came over, when we didn't know what we were doing, when we grabbed lotion to make access a bit easier. You could say that I lost my virginity to my boyfriend who left me 6 days after I lost my virginity to him. You could say my virginity was something more like stone, hacked and mangled by each person I allowed inside afterward. You could call it a painting, slaps of color on a white canvas. Once the first drop is painted, it doesn't matter how many more you allow to color the stained surface. The canvas was ruined anyway. You could say my sex addiction destroyed any chance of re-virginizing. You could say that. Or you could say I never lost it at all. You could say it didn't exist. You could say a lot of things. My husband said he'd wait, and maybe that's what did it. Maybe that's what broke the cyclical abuse on my body, abuse I allowed others to have. You could say I broke from the torment of addiction then. You could say that I'll never heal. You could say the paint is too thick on my body to ever wash it away. He said it didn't matter. He said I was beautiful. He didn't wash away what others had done to me. He taught me to look upside down, sideways, cross-eyed, curved. He taught me that right side up and straight didn't have to be the only way to see myself. I could be something more. There's ink embedded on my skin now, so unlike the paint they casted, permanent, a paw tattooed on my chest from a dog we considered our child. And my husband got the same on his calf. It was different to paint a tribute to love on my skin. You could say it was wrong to do, that I blemished my own skin this time. You could also call it beautiful. Thank you.
All right, so next up we will have Chad, and then Rex, and then Ron.
Hi. So for only the second time in all these years of coming to Helicon, I'm going to read some poems. Well, actually, I'm going to read poems. I've only read one, so I'm not going to read. Yeah. So for the first time, I'm going to read some poems. The other time was just one poem. It's not clear. And these were, so I went to the League of Utah Writers Conference last fall, and it was, I'm sorry, what was her name? Margaret Pettis, who's going to be reading a STARS thing on Sunday at 6. Don't bring any booze. I'm warning you, don't bring it.
We're going to have bouncers.
Yeah. At the Bluebird, upper chamber of the Bluebird. She was there, Margaret Pettis was there, and she's this hippie, she's got long white hair, and she had us doing these exercises where she had chosen kind of a famous poem for each of the national parks in Utah. So she would read that poem, and then she would have us do these weird exercises like we'd read one line of the poem, and then we would continue that line, and then continue the next line, and continue the next line, and continue the next line, and then that was our poem, and then we'd read them. Stuff like that, and we did like, we only did 4 of them, but we came up with these 4 poems, and it was really fun and kind of like a stretching exercise for the brain, and it was just really exhilarating. And I ran across the notebook that I brought to that just a few days after Amanda kind of got her stuff together to do her reading, so I thought I would read these. And then also this notebook, I took this on a work trip where I had to talk about work. And there's an outline, and it kind of reads like poetry as well. And I didn't really, so I'll start with this one. This doesn't have a title. It's outline for my work trip to Austin, I guess. This week. Intro myself. I've made this presentation a million times, so I didn't need a lot of detail. I just kind of had to jot it down, I think. But I don't actually now remember, because this was like last summer. Intro myself. Joke about Edmond. Joke about Texas. Then in quotes. This is Texas, Chad. We start drinking coffee at 4:30 in the morning. Explain old IT infrastructure. Explain new IT infrastructure. Joke about Edmond. Joke about Texas. Texas will be happy. That was my whole presentation. That took 45 minutes. Okay, so then these are these poems, and they came out of these other poems. I don't think you'll be able to know, but here's the first one. There's no titles. A record store. I hear music. It's Lou Reed, an ode to Sweet Jane, to fill the night like a deep breath. They play another tune as it gets darker. A record store in the darkness, but with sounds so like light. This one is about fishing. Cutthroat trout swims up from the stream bed, takes the fly, and the way you know it's a cutty is the red of its throat, hence the name. Red, not unlike the ruby lips of the lover who waits, the girl who can make you cut the trip short. Just 2 more. This is the first one that we did, and I think it's the one that I like the most. Starlings cry and quarrel as darkness falls, where no record of summer remains. There is only hunger, not even the smells of earth or grass. But we speak together, staring into the fire, into the failing light. The birds quiet down, and later on, so do we. And one last one. I wish I could remember how this one came about, but I think it had something to do with that poem. I ate the strawberries. I ate the peaches. What did he eat out of the fridge? They were so good. Plums. He had the plums. Yeah. I think this is something along those lines. It goes like this. Thank you for letting me stay in your lovely home, where you try so hard to seem normal. That's it. Thanks.
I've given up trying to look normal. My wife doesn't like bugs. Now, that may not be a shocker because a lot of women don't like bugs. But it just, she grew up in the city and bugs are icky and gross. I grew up on the farm and in the forest. Bugs are bait. There's lots of uses for bugs, except spiders. They're too soft to stay on the hook. But when we started dating, I took her up to Pack Saddle Basin, one of my favorite places in the world. Turns out that she was new to horseflies. One got her. She claimed it stabbed her. And yeah, that's about what a horsefly bite feels like. Well, I decapitated a small tree there and gave it to her to swish and told her she'd keep swishing around and keep the horseflies out. And it worked, except a deer fly, those quiet little assassins, snuck in and got her. And it felt just like a horsefly bite. And I couldn't convince her that there was a difference. To her, it was bugs and it was icky. Okay. Well, she did date me again, and a few times, and so I took her fishing. I found out later that fish are slimy. And when she found out they eat bugs that are icky, that's really gross. But she was happy to sit on the bank, and while I fished out in the Henry's Fork, the Snake River, and the fishing was fair. It was not great. It was still fairly early in the year, so the worms I was using just didn't seem to cut it. So I put my rod on the bank for a minute and waded out a little past ankle deep and grabbed a flat rock and pulled it out quickly and turned it over. And just as I'd hoped, there were hellgrammites on the bottom. Now, hellgrammites are the earlier stage of what my family called trout flies, but we were never scientifically correct about any weeds or bugs. So it was probably a species of salmon fly, and they probably weren't called hellgrammites by real scientists, but they look about like, well, you remember Men in Black, the guy that ate Tommy Lee Jones? That's what they look like. And what in the early summer is when they crawl to the bank, get up on a rock or a willow, and they dry out into a hard shell, and a few days later they break out of that shell and they are salmon flies. And they breed and drop their eggs into the river and die. And that's all they do, feed the fish and the birds. But if you get them early at this stage, the fish are still hungry and looking for them. And so I flip over the rock and I grab a couple and drop the rock carefully back so more hellgrammites can come for somebody else. I dump the worms out of my Band-Aid can that I keep my bait in and deposit these hellgrammites. And then I get another rock and I flip it over. It's a fairly big rock and there's at least a dozen, and one of them's just gigantic, and so I grab it and the others are scurrying and dropping off the rock. So I just stick it in the corner of my mouth just for a few seconds while I gather up the others and put them in the can. And it was only a few seconds, not more than half a minute, and I got it into the can. But you know, that night, she wouldn't kiss me goodnight. But I finally got her to agree to marry me. But a few weeks before we got married, she said, you know, we're going to be married and together, and so you need to keep the bugs away from me, or me away from the bugs. Think of yourself as the lord of the manor, and you are protecting me. And I agreed, and we got married. But then it kind of became the running joke. Oh, Lord of the Manor, there's a fly in here. Lord of the Manor, there's a spider in the bathtub and it's icky. I saved her. But life went on, we had kids. We had work. The joke kind of died out. So about a dozen years later, I was kind of surprised one Father's Day when I get this flat package, and it was to the Lord of the Manor. I'm going, what? And I open it up, and it's a tennis racket. I have not played tennis in my life. And what would the Lord of the Manor do with a tennis racket? And my wife says, oh, it's for the continuing war on bugs. Now, the joke had died down, but the war on bugs had continued all this time. She says, look, it's metal screen. There's batteries in the handle. You push this little button down, see the light come on? And if you touch it, it'll shock you. And when you hit a bug, it'll zap, and you'll get a spark. And I go, all right. You push the button, and the light comes on, and yeah! Yeah, it might spark. Well, we took it out, played with it, and there's mosquitoes, and bit, bit, bit. And then a fly, pop. And then there was a yellow jacket, pop! Oh, this is fun. And the bigger the bug, the bigger the spark. This is a great toy. And we took it to family reunions, and I swear I heard my kids with their little cousins saying, yeah, just put your tongue on that. Anyway, later that summer, I was in the house, probably on a Saturday. My son come into the backyard. He had a broomstick and he was doing ninja fighting in the backyard. And he comes in and he says, there's bees, and they got me. And I go, oh, there's bees, huh? And so I go out to the backyard, and we have this woodshed. It's about 35 feet long and 15 feet deep, and there's no south wall. It's just open, and I hadn't been very diligent that summer, and so there just lots of yellow jacket nests in there, and I poked my head in. Ow! One got me. Ow! One got me. Oh, geez. So I go back in the house, and my son's there with a slice of onion on a lip and a slice of onion on his cheek, and I said, what are you doing? He said, Mom says it takes the sting out. I says, does it work? And he goes, yeah, a little. I said, well, where's mine? So I'm putting it on here, and I go, where's my bug racket? And so I find my bug racket, and I have to put down the onions, and I've got these like Viking horns started here. So with my battle axe, I go to battle, Viking horns, and I walk out toward the shed, and there's just waves of yellow jackets coming in out of the shed. And I need more than a battle axe. I need a shield. What have I got for a shield? And I go in the garage and there's what? What can I use? Green paint. No, it's empty. What else? Starting fluid.
Sorry, time's up.
Okay.
Coming out. After being married 50 months. And it's been your Kim's number 5. As far as that you know, you're going to guard your life. If you weren't, I'll be all alone. Without a woman to call my own. I went to my pants, go on too. And that'd be enough to make me blue. You came along, the woman of my dreams. We go get together, self-esteem. You mean a lot to me, and I love you. So what I want to say is, Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you. Last call if there's anybody else who's been dying to share something. All right, if not, reminder, next Helicon will be January 25th. We have presenters from the English department coming here to lecture, Ann Stark, who I believe does mostly fiction, and Rob Coons, who does mostly nonfiction. So they'll both be here 2 weeks on the 25th, same time, same place. It should be good. Beyond that, again, thanks to everyone who made this possible. I'd like to ask for your help putting up the chairs as usual, so we clear out the room. And that's it for Helicon this week.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy.